I guess I was about 3 years into my music performance degree when it began to dawn on me that I probably wasn't cut out for it. I mean, this notion of being a professional classical musician. No, I didn't drop out of school or anything, but let's just say it gradually got more difficult to ignore the realities of what likely awaited if I chose to pursue that life. I was surrounded by great players, most of whom were cobbling together a living as freelancers, maybe with a few students for a little fixed income, struggling to find the time to practice in order to land that full-time gig with a major orchestra that would, get them out of the rat race and into maybe something even better than a living wage. But after I ventured forth, after graduation, and got a day job in IT, it was hard for me to just drop it. So I did some after-hours freelancing in Chicago, often barely breaking even, sometimes losing money on it because a lot of my regular gigs at the time were in Milwaukee, meaning most or all of the money I made I just spent in real time on gas and food. I kept going for about a year after I moved to New York City, until 9/11, when I could no longer get my base into the office because, well, I worked for a large financial institution that was just 10 blocks away from the World Trade Center. And of course, an upright base didn't fit through the X-ray scanners that had become a part of the new everyday reality. So that was kind of it for a while. For the first time in my life, I wasn't practicing or playing anything, which, if I'm being honest, it was a relief. It had become more of a burden than anything, and the economics of it had ceased to make sense a long time ago. So it was actually quite handy to have this big exogenous event force me to let it go. It enabled me to wriggle out of having to explicitly decide to quit on my own. But what followed was kind of a dark age. About 5 or 6 years of just working and paying bills, when at some point Matthew and I began to awaken to how empty our lives had become. However, this time at least we had a little bit of money in the bank, so it occurred to us that maybe it would be nice to get a piano. So basically it took a dark age in order for me first to move beyond relief and realize how much I really missed playing, that I wasn't a complete person without it. But second, that I could invite music back into my life on different terms. Most important was that money didn't have to have anything to do with how, what, or why I played. Hear my words, people. Music is a much better life companion when you're not relying on it to pay your bills. Henceforth, I would play whatever I wanted, however I wanted to play it. No fucks given, apart from my own fucks, which, it turns out, are sufficiently numerous, such that no other fucks are required in addition. And hence, the amateur. It's funny, and perhaps telling, that the most frequent response I get with respect to the name of this channel is one of pity. Don't be so hard on yourself. Meaning that the secondary derogatory definition of the term amateur is, in fact, more dominant in people's minds than the first. Even so, both definitions certainly apply to me. I don't expect to ever have to rely on this for money. I would, however, feel like the luckiest man on earth if I managed to somehow make retirement beer money from this channel. Right, Hercule? The idea of helping YouTube, or rather its parent company, sell Nissans or breakfast cereal or hemorrhoid cream doesn't overjoy me. However, I'd be outright lying if I said this monetization game isn't intriguing. They make it hard too, so like and subscribe. And I'm a proud hack. One of the greatest things about being an amateur is being able to accept and ultimately embrace your flaws. You may spend years working at them anyway for your own reasons, but at the end of the day, who cares? There are no consequences. You don't need the money. It's great, this amateur thing. So after 14 years of doing this, I've spent some time thinking about how I went about it and things I learned along the way, and most importantly, what I'd do differently if I did it again. This is the advice that I'd give to people who studied piano at some point earlier in life, got more than the basics down, found it to be rewarding, and want to pick it up again in a semi-serious way while they make money doing other things. Note, this series is not for beginners, but you'll find a few links to adult beginner programs in the description below. I was originally going to combine a few topics in this first episode, but I found that I had a lot to say about the first step, which is to obtain a piano or piano-like substance. There's nothing quite like a nice, fine acoustic piano. However, before taking the plunge, there are a lot of things to think about, such as the climate where you live. Does the temperature and relative humidity where you live fluctuate dramatically between summer, winter, spring, and fall? Are you in a position to regulate the temperature and especially the humidity in the room where you'd put a piano? This is a relatively easy and inexpensive problem to solve. If you have a central HVAC system that also regulates humidity, you're all set. Keep the relative humidity between 35 and 55% year-round, and avoid placing the piano close to any vents or radiators, and ideally not too close to windows or exterior doors. But a lot of us don't have fancy central HVAC systems. No big deal. Get yourself a room humidifier for the cold, dry months, and keep the room more or less enclosed, unless you fancy filling the tank on a daily basis. I highly recommend the AirCare 2.5 gallon evaporative humidifier. It's super low maintenance, and has a nice big tank that only needs to be refilled about every 10 days or so, as long as you keep the room relatively closed and set the unit to maintain humidity between 35 and 45%. If you live in an arid climate, this is the most dangerous environment for a piano. You'll need to run the humidifier year-round, or trust me, the piano will deteriorate rapidly. Most of a piano is wood, which needs a certain level of humidity to stay plumped up. If you lapse in your humidification duties, you'll start to have all kinds of problems. Loose turning pegs, meaning they won't hold a tune and are really expensive and risky to repair. And cracked soundboards, the worst. Sound ruined, worthless piano. Basically, if you live in a dry climate, you should think long and hard about what it will take to maintain an environment that keeps the instrument from deteriorating into a worthless pile of bones in the sand. Pianos make noise. Do you rent? Do you share walls with neighbors? Do you think you have a sense of the tolerance level that they, and also other members of your household, will have with respect to hearing you practice? If you think you do, think again. My experience is that most people are charmed by the idea of a piano in a home. However, once the piano is played outside the context of, say, a dinner party, which no one has anymore anyway, that's when the positive feelings end. Practicing is a time-consuming and tedious process, especially for people who are not you. You will play the same passages over and over and over and over and over again, and only you will perceive and be gratified by your incremental progress. Everyone else in earshot will feel tortured by and dread your practice sessions. And then when they say something about it, you will feel personally attacked and wounded to your very core. I want you to trust me when I tell you this. Even those who love you the most on this earth will hate listening to you practice. And believe me, once the seal of thinking that you're not bothering anyone is broken, bad psychological things happen. You will feel persecuted and abused, and well, it's just going to disrupt your whole flow and ruin everything. What about soundproofing, you ask? Effective soundproofing is extremely expensive, and even then, it usually only gets you to like 97% reduction in what can be heard outside the room. And that 3%, it is still a problem for some people. It cost me 30,000 Canadian dollars to soundproof this room, with foot-thick walls, concrete ceilings, double high-density doors, and a dead vent chamber, like everything. I spared no expense. But if I'm playing really loudly and persistently, I very, very occasionally still get the odd complaint from upstairs. And that's through 10 inches of concrete. Also, don't think for 1 second that gluing acoustic foam to your walls is going to do a damn bit of good. It might help with the acoustics in the room, but it will do absolutely nothing to keep sound from leaking out and bothering people. Pianos are heavy and fragile. That's a bad combination. There's a big steel frame inside each of them. Moving them requires usually former linebackers who are both strong and gentle enough to move them without destroying or damaging them. Are you settled, or do you expect to be moving around a bit still? Most standard moving companies won't go anywhere near a piano. And don't be one of those people who abandon their pianos in apartments because they weren't prepared to pay piano movers. So let's say you're settled. You've got temp and humidity under control, you've got a supportive, tolerant household, and no shared walls, or maybe you've spent some money on soundproofing your studio. But you live outside an urban area. Who is going to tune your piano? Do your research here and find out if any piano technicians in the nearest city will even come to you. And also find out if they will charge you mileage to and from, in addition to the piano tuning. So yeah, a real piano is a long-term commitment, but if based on the above, you're not in a position to take care of one, or you want to avoid destroying your home life and relationships, the good news is that digital pianos these days are awesome. Manufacturers, in particular Yamaha, have done amazing work mimicking the action and the sensitivity of a real piano, and they sound great. In fact, I would say that they are better sounding and have better action than most used acoustic pianos under, say, $5,000 or new pianos under $10,000. And they are certainly better than older free pianos that have often been neglected and may need a bunch of expensive repairs. Digital pianos are a hell of a lot easier to move, they require virtually zero maintenance, and headphones mean that you can practice as long as you want without bothering anybody. There are several excellent models under $1,000, which I won't go into here because, well, I don't need to. Others have already done that work, so visit the link in the description to see a couple of very well-considered reviews of some excellent models in that price range, as well as some nasty models to avoid. Also, I think it's nice to support local dealers, because they give you the option to try them out for real, first of all, but most of the good models that I've looked at are available on Amazon. So, I feel like I can speak with some authority on this specific topic because, basically, I made every single mistake. I bought a 6-foot Steinway 4 months before moving to another country where I was going to be renting. By far the single most expensive decision I've ever made. Various unfortunate situations with landlords meant that since its arrival in Canada, this piano has moved 4 times. The first place was up 3 flights of stairs and then down again. Those moves were two of the most nauseating experiences of my life. Only slightly less nauseating were the moves in and out by crane, for a grand total of 5,000 Canadian dollars if you include the tips for the former linebackers. It's a good idea to tip former linebackers well. Do I have regrets? Maybe a few, but... So I found old Maud here at the Steinway Factory event in 2016. She's not that old, actually. 2008, I think. But that factory event is one of the coolest things ever. It's a once-a-year event where they fill 2 enormous floors of the factory with freshly tuned new and used pianos and let you just walk around and play all of them. I can't remember how many pianos I played that day, but after just a few notes on Maud, I knew she was mine. Instant bonding, no joke. It was like that time my brother and I snuck off to the Humane Society when we were teenagers, just to have a look, you know, and came home with the best dog that ever lived, even though she could never really control her bladder when she got excited. One suffers for the things one loves. So yeah, probably you should just get a good digital piano. It's the logical, practical, economical choice for most people, especially when you're just starting out again. If, however, some enchanted evening down the road, you happen to meet a stranger across a crowded room,